One thing I've been thinking about doing for a little while right now has been to make a podcast, and I think that it's just gonna come out kind of horribly wrong the first couple of times that I do it, probably the first many times that I try to do it, but I decided to give it a try, even if I'm the only person that listens back to this. At least it'll be something to let me collect my thoughts. I've been listening to a lot of content, and part of me thinks that it's all kind of just going into a void right now. Um, just forgetting a lot of the stuff that I listen to, and if I look back at some of the things that I write down from a couple of months ago, I almost can't even interpret it because I don't write enough detail, and I think that if instead of writing, if I'm talking through things and really having to elaborate on some of these ideas a little bit more, trying to fill in some of those gaps, these ideas might be able to come together, solidify, and then also be able to bring them up in conversations a little bit more easily. So a big part of this is for me, but then, maybe if somewhere along the way, if somebody else finds some value in this, that would be really cool too. I just came back from a float, and this was one of the things I was thinking about, so kind of had to just overcome a little bit of butterflies to try to just, decide to come back and sit right down and do this thing. Otherwise, I don't think I would do anything like this. Um, it was kind of an interesting, um, just like, there's been a lot of kind of synchronous events in the last couple of weeks, maybe the last 2 weeks or so. This one in particular tonight, I just turned 27 yesterday, 2 days ago, and 3 years ago now was the first time that I went to a float back when I was living in Wisconsin, and it opened up really a brand new world. I absolutely loved the float experience. It's definitely going to be a little tough being farther away from this Float Boston, and I don't know what I'll do once I'm out in the Worcester area. I don't think that there's any float centers out there, but I'll have to see. Maybe there'll be something that I can do once I move out that way. But yeah, so just kind of getting into this whole float experience started 3 years ago. Kind of coming around full circle again. This is sort of a birthday float of sorts tonight, and this kind of opened up the door to thinking about this whole podcast thing. Another sort of synchronous thing that was happening was the fifth year reunion, and just seeing a couple of the people. That was fun, but I think the big part was the realizing the gap that's there, and seeing what it's like to not have certain people around all the time. I obviously enjoy having my introverted time to myself. That's a huge aspect of my life, and it's something that I'll cherish, and definitely there's a ton of things that I can find to do with my own time, but at the same time there's plenty of people that I enjoyed seeing briefly at the reunion, and plenty of more people that I didn't see at the reunion that I knew from Tufts that I really just didn't understand, I guess at the time, just sort of how it shaped my brain to be around these people, and to see through their eyes, and to see how it to opened up from who I was in high school to who I was at the end of college. I mean, I was just an absolutely different person. There's almost no. Obviously, there's similarities, but I probably wouldn't be able to like look myself in the eye and like understand who I was at that time in high school and be able to have respect for myself. Like there was just so many things that I could see from myself as a senior in high school, where it'd be like, what were you up to then? Just really immature and childish, and also not open to a lot of like other people's backgrounds. And I mean, part of that was what I was exposed to and who I was hanging out with, but I think a lot of it was also just coming from insecurities. But anyways, this all just kind of comes back to the idea of having these other people around that were pushing me, challenging me, and the interactions on a day-to-day basis that were changing my brain, like really changing, almost at a fundamental, like molecular level, like shaping my brain. And I could feel it even within the 3 days that we had that reunion. This was something that I already kind of started to see taking place, and that's sort of just the feeling that I got, that there was something a little bit missing. Like once that the weekend ended, was, here I am going back to, pushing myself to do these sort of introverted activities, and that's obviously great, but there's a missing piece of the puzzle with all of that. So I'm not sure what I'm gonna do about that, and gotta like think about these solutions. Gotta think really hard about it, and thinking hard doesn't always necessarily convert to a solution. I guess another thing that was kind of coming up during the float was just the idea of during the summer, where there's all of these various things that you want to plan. Like there's so few weeks during the summer where in New England you have the ability to just get outside and to enjoy the warm weather, and it's like every weekend you better have something to do, or else it's a wasted weekend. And with the move coming up, like that's a little bit stressful, and you don't want to waste any time spending the weekend like preparing for the move. So there's weeknights where maybe I could spend time doing stuff for that, but it's just kind of like the chaos of the summer. But also that chaos is a good thing, because you want to be enjoying the weekends. It's like, in a way, like kind of this catch-22, and then summer ends come maybe September, mid-September, October, and then you're back into just sort of the gloomy winter. And luckily, like, I've discovered the joys of skiing, but even so, the winter is just not the same as the summer. And it's, you just don't know what you have until it's gone. But still, there's something about this chaos of the summer where it's, especially for someone like myself who likes to have things planned out and organized in advance. I was thinking to myself, like, I guess like it'd be nice to have a calendar and know weeks in advance like what I was going to do for each weekend, but it's just not feasible. And it's not to say like, oh, I should blame it on somebody else for not having things scheduled. And it's it's up to everybody to just kind of have these schedules that are intermingling, and they're all going to kind of fit together in this intricate web, and it's not anybody's fault. It's all going to come together last minute. And I just have to be the one to deal with that. It's really on me to figure that out. And I mean, the first step here was just to kind of have that realization that, hey, summer is always going to be like this. There's a couple of short weekends during the year. It's like 3 months that we get out of the 12, and then it's over, and you better know what you're doing for that period. Yeah, that's what's been going on with the float. I guess part of like what wanted me to kind of get on and start talking here was what I was saying much earlier in this was just watching a lot of videos on YouTube, and the structure of the work that I've been doing right now, a lot of it has just been clicking around on the screen, doing manual annotations of training data sets for machine learning, and it's pretty mindless work. It doesn't require much more than just the sort of manual dexterity, and so you can kind of partition your brain off to be also listening to YouTube videos. And I've for so many years really felt as though I could just step and be one degree removed from politics. And as somebody who's a straight white male, it's really nice to have that luxury. But it's kind of all finally coming into perspective that that I do have that luxury, and that white privilege isn't just like a term that's getting thrown around because people are upset about nothing. Like, there really is something here that's tangible and that is solidifying in my head that I am now starting to come to terms with. And not to say like that it's this generic guilt. Maybe a couple of years back that I just sort of was like, oh, I'm supposed to feel guilty about because some other people are saying this, like, oh yeah, you should feel like this white guilt about the privilege you have. Like, no, it's just an understanding of like what I've gotten throughout my life. And like, obviously, yeah, sure, I'm grateful of it, but also I wanna understand, at least, if not to do something, at least to understand the sort of the system and the politics that are going on, the economics. And I think more so really than a lot of the politics specifically have been diving into the economics, but those factor obviously very heavily into the politics. And so there's, I would say primarily like the Majority Report, the Michael Brooks show, like those two were kind of the first ones that really clicked for me. And the stuff before that, it was a lot of like the intellectual dark web, and those, it was a bunch of like straight white males, with the exception of Dave Rubin being a gay white male. Like, the guys were all just going on about their own grievances and how they were getting censored in the media, and meanwhile they're making millions of dollars. And it's not to say that they don't have a point. Like, there's definitely a middle ground, but the middle ground is not like halfway between what they're saying and what the other side is saying. It's much, much closer to the other side than what they're saying. Like, they've got a tiny, tiny little point stuck inside of a very, very messy system of ideas that they're kind of just throwing around there. And it took me some number of months, and I think that it's not just like I had this revelation because of coming onto the show. I think that, the culture is kind of waking up to this too. I think that even like this, Quillette is a newspaper that had been kind of promoting intellectual dark web ideas, is now sort of starting to distance themselves, at least from Dave Rubin. And, who's to say that the next member of the intellectual dark web won't be next, but I'm just happy that, it really just took maybe seeing like a Twitter conversation or something with Sam Seder and being really upset that like Sam Harris was getting attacked by this guy. And then like now if I look back at that same conversation, I see it the exact opposite way, like literally the exact opposite way, and it's just sort of crazy that I could see it so differently. Like it's absolutely remarkable. So this is sort of a forum where I wanted to get into talking about this kind of stuff, just to air some of it out. And there's so many other people talking about some of this stuff online, so I don't expect to really garner like a platform for it, but maybe by synthesizing some other stuff into this, there's a chance that it would be useful to somebody. I mean, the other thing that I can maybe bring into it is doing some reading of some other types of books. I just finished The Order of Time, which definitely absolutely fucked up my sense of like the linearity of time, and I think it should fuck up anybody's sense of that. I think that in general people probably just have a nice orderly sense of, it's 12 o'clock, then it's 1 o'clock, then it's 2 o'clock, and that's just how the clock works, and every day it spins around and it goes like that until you die. And this book just really tells you that that's not at all how time works, and that clocks are a convenient way, sort of at our scale and our speed and everything, to put things in a bit of a perspective. But even if you think about how we access our memories, and how sort of you talk about like maybe on a drug, like time speeds up or slows down, or even not on a drug, if you're in a particular experience, like, man, that felt like it dragged on forever. Like there's so many different ways where time is not just this thing that's marching on at a steady beat. It's all sorts of wavy, in and out, and irregular sorts of motions. So I don't know what sorts of synthesis of these various videos that I'm watching from various disciplines, and books that I'm trying to read, and other ideas that pop into my head, like maybe will come together. But the idea here is just to try to put something together, and we'll see where it ends up. So this is kind of the first episode that I've got here, and we'll see when I build up the courage to get a second one together. But until the next time, talk to you then.